"We've lost contact," the duty officer shouted, tearing through the tense air of the Air Force Command Center. On the radar screen, the massive C-17, carrying hundreds of U.S. soldiers, spiraled into chaos over the Atlantic. Control signals jammed, the fly-by-wire system bucked violently as if seized by an unseen hand. Young officers panicked, barking conflicting orders, until a cryptic code flashed across the screen. Eagle Flight, Mediterranean, 3 years ago. Maya Johnson, seated in the corner, her hand instinctively touching the scar behind her ear. It was the signature of a teammate she believed dead. And if it appeared here, this crisis wasn't just an accident. It was a reminder that the secret she thought buried was rising, just as hundreds of lives hung in the balance. The clang of metal echoed in the secure briefing room as an iPad hit the hard tile floor. Its screen flickered, displaying technical schematics of the F-35 Lightning II. The already tense air thickened, as if every pair of eyes in the room sought a scapegoat. And that scapegoat was Maya Johnson. She sat quietly at the end of the long table, her faded gray shirt out of place among the crisp uniforms and gleaming insignia. Eyes bored into her, not just with suspicion but with contempt. A few young officers leaned back, exchanging smirks. They didn't need to say it aloud. To them, Maya's presence here was a joke. A male voice cut through, cold and sharp as a blade. "You don't belong here." It was Lieutenant Brad Collins, 6'3", broad-shouldered, his stern face etched with the confidence of those always hailed as elite. He didn't glance at the iPad screen, unconcerned with the classified data now exposed to anyone in the room. His target was the woman in the plain shirt, stripped of rank, power, and in his eyes value. Muffled laughter rippled around the table, suppressed but loud enough to send a message. Maya Johnson was a shadow of the past. A former pilot, trained, but who gave up. An outsider in this temple of military power. Maya bent to pick up the iPad, her steady hands, calloused from years gripping jet controls, betraying no tremor. Her eyes remained calm, unshaken by the contempt raining down. She placed the device on the table, sat up straight, and breathed. Steady breaths. 4 seconds in, 7 held, 8 out. The silent discipline that once kept her alive through 9G flights now steadied her in this stifling room. The steel door slammed open, silencing the whispers. A duty officer stormed in, his face pale with tension. The files in his hands trembled. "We have an emergency." The room fell silent. Officers turned, eyes shifting from Maya to the digital map dominating the front wall. A blinking red dot drifted across the Atlantic, accompanied by cold text. C-17 Globemaster III, 230 U.S. soldiers aboard. The simulation showed the massive plane lurching erratically, its trajectory warping by the second. Incoming data signaled the worst. The fly-by-wire system was erratic, electronics seemingly hacked or critically damaged. In less than 40 minutes, this iron bird could become a mass coffin plunging into the sea. Faces once cold and mocking now tightened, paling. Officers threw out technical jargon, citing emergency protocols. But amid the chaos, Maya silently studied the screen, her eyes tracing every detail, memorizing every number, as if they'd done this thousands of times. In her mind, memories surged. The Mediterranean sky, radar's harsh curves, blaring alarms, and the moment she survived as her entire squadron vanished in flames. The scar behind her left ear formed then a memento from an ejection seat at 15,000 feet. Maya whispered, almost inaudible, "This isn't a technical failure. It's an electronic jamming pattern." An officer nearby turned, frowning. "What did you say?" But Maya fell silent, her eyes locked on the dancing data. In that moment she knew two things. 1. No one in this room, not even Brad and his young officers, had real experience with this scenario. 2. The only person who'd flown through an electromagnetic storm and survived was sitting at the table's end, in a plain shirt they all scorned. The room erupted with overlapping orders. Someone suggested calling reserve pilots. Another demanded NATO protocols. Collins slammed the table, asserting command. But no one had a clear plan. No one dared take responsibility for guiding the massive plane out there. Then, amid the chaos, a message appeared on the main screen. From an unidentified comm system. Eagle Flight, Mediterranean, 3 years ago. The air froze. Maya shivered slightly. It wasn't just a code. It was a ghost from her past. A reminder that what she tried to bury was returning right when hundreds of lives needed her most. All right, dear audience, if you're gripped by this story, drop a comment with the number 1 or I'm still here to keep listening. The command room's noise drained away. The chatter, overlapping orders, the tapping of pens on tables all vanished in a deadly silence. On the main screen, the text, Eagle Flight, Mediterranean, 3 years ago, blinked like an old scar torn open, bleeding anew. Maya Johnson sat motionless. Her hand rested on the table, fingers trembling for a split second before steadying. No one noticed but her. In that brief moment, memories flooded back the Mediterranean's fiery night, the roar of MiGs, the brief screams over radio before the frequency died. Eagle Flight, the squadron once a point of pride, ending with her as its sole survivor. Brad Collins shot to his feet, slamming his hand on the table. What kind of stunt is this? Who dares hack the Pentagon's secure channel? A tech officer rushed to the control station, keys clattering. Impossible. This signal isn't external. It's embedded in our display system. The room tensed. If true, someone not only knew about Eagle Flight, but had access to U.S. military infrastructure. This was no longer a technical glitch. It was an attack. On the map screen, the C-17 wobbled, its path fracturing. Red alerts flashed. Unstable airspeed, unsynchronized fly-by-wire, abnormal hydraulic pressure. The point of no return was under 30 minutes away. If it didn't land or stabilize soon, the massive plane would run out of fuel over the ocean. 230 soldiers gone. A cold voice crackled through the internal speakers, mixed with static. 3 years, Maya, time to tell the truth. Maya jolted. No one else heard her name, but to her, each syllable was a blade. It wasn't a stranger's voice. It was Ethan Keller, her number 2 wingman back then. The man official reports declared, body not recovered. The man Maya believed was dead. She swallowed hard, keeping her face composed. Meanwhile, the other officers looked around, confused. Why was the system broadcasting an unknown voice? They didn't know it was drilling straight into Maya's heart. Fabrication, Collins growled, masking unease with anger. Some imposter. Get me a list of all comm sources now. But Maya knew. No one but Ethan could know those code phrases. No one but him could invoke Eagle Flight at this moment. The screens danced with data, reports flying. A young officer trembled. We need someone who's handled manual reversion in electromagnetic interference. There's no training manual for this. We don't have anyone. Maya inhaled steady breaths. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. In her mind, she redrew the C-17's control schematic, flight balance, how thrust could compensate for control surfaces if hydraulics failed. Lessons she'd drilled in the Mediterranean's darkness, where one wrong move could have buried her at sea. But she stayed silent, still silent, because part of her knew, if she spoke, Eagle Flight's secret would never stay buried. An alarm blared, shattering her hesitation. Lost data link with the C-17 cockpit, an officer shouted. We're down to passive radar signals. They can't transmit out anymore. The room descended into chaos. Papers flew, officers argued, hands pounded keyboards with no way out. All eyes turned to the head of the table, the grizzled general, the meeting's chief of staff. His face, etched with deep lines, carried the weight of a choice no one wanted. Do we have anyone with real combat experience in this scenario? He asked, voice hoarse. A heavy silence fell. The young officers who'd mocked Maya now looked down, avoiding his gaze. Collins opened his mouth, then closed it. No one did. Maya felt her heartbeat, slow, steady. She heard Ethan's voice again. Time to tell the truth. And she understood. The truth wasn't just about the past. It was pounding right in front of her. 230 innocent lives. She placed both hands on the table, standing slowly. The chair scraped, a shrill sound in the silent room. Dozens of eyes turned to her, shocked, confused, some on the verge of scoffing but holding back. Yes, Maya said softly, but loud enough for all to hear. I was there. I've flown manual through electromagnetic interference. I can bring them home. The room erupted. Collins nearly leapt from his chair. Don't joke. You're not in the service anymore. But the old general raised a hand, cutting him off. His eyes locked on Maya, piercing her calm facade. He'd seen too many young officers die from arrogance, too many truths buried for honor. Now, he knew. The choice wasn't on paper. It was life or death, trust or lose everything. Maya Johnson, he said slowly. Step forward. Maya took a deep breath. In her heart, the Mediterranean's darkness surged back, with Ethan's voice echoing, If you save them, I'll expose Eagle Flight. And she stepped forward. Dear audience, pause for a moment to hit that subscribe button before diving into the heart of the story, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here. Drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. It's amazing to see people from all over joining us. The command room's light dimmed, the main screen, now the focal point. A digital map spanned the Atlantic, data lines tracing the C-17 Globemaster III's erratic spiral. The massive iron bird drifted like a wounded whale, lost in a black ocean. Maya stood tall, hands on the table's edge, fingers trembling slightly but eyes cold. Every officer watched her, a mix of doubt, hope, and fear. They didn't trust the woman in the plain shirt, but they had no one else. She began analyzing. The dancing numbers on the screen were a familiar language. Airspeed oscillations, hydraulic pressure drops, unsynchronized control signals, all echoed what she'd faced in a cockpit surrounded by electromagnetic interference. No longer theory, but instinct carved from survival. The old voice crackled through the comms, laced with static, hoarse but clear. You're repeating the past, Maya. But this time, no one escapes. It was Ethan Keller, her left-wing pilot in Eagle Flight. The man listed as missing, body unrecovered. Now his voice echoed in the command center, a ghost from hell. Maya clenched her jaw but didn't respond. Any reaction would turn into a knife against her. She turned to the technician's screen. Do we still have auxiliary comms with the C-17 pilots? The young officer shook his head, lips trembling. Only one way. They can't hear us, but we can send periodic data packets. Maya nodded slightly. No dialogue, just data. Every instruction had to be encoded in short, precise signals, like Morse code sent to a young pilot facing their first crisis. She began typing the first commands: disable all autopilot channels, reset circuits in sequence, maintain 70% thrust to avoid instability. The packet was sent, an arrow into the dark. Moments later, the C-17's path shifted slightly, stabilizing. Gasps echoed in the room, eyes brightening with hope. But instantly, Ethan's signal surged, fiercer, flooding every channel. You can't save them, Maya. Just like you didn't save us. That night the Mediterranean swallowed everyone but you. And now you want to play hero? Maya closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. Images flooded back. A sea of fire screams over the radio, her sharp 3-degree turn breaking formation, then the explosion tearing the sky. 7 F-35 seconds vanished, only she emerged from the night sea. A choice saved her, but took her entire team. The room only caught fragments of the message through static, but it was enough to sow doubt. Some officers glanced at Maya, their eyes asking, did she really survive by abandoning others? Maya didn't answer, didn't defend. Words didn't matter now. Only results did. She refocused on the screen, sending new signals. Balance left-right thrust. Descend to a stable atmospheric layer. Open partial flaps to maintain lift. On the map, the flight path curved into a steadier arc. The C-17 still wobbled but no longer plummeted. Scattered claps broke out, hasty. But Maya didn't relax. She knew this was just the first step. Then, a layer of rogue data flooded the screen, overlaying the C-17's signals. Chaotic symbols, like jamming code. Ethan was injecting false commands, trying to pull the massive plane off its safe path. If the young pilot wasn't sharp, they'd be led into the ocean like a kite with a cut string. Maya reacted instantly. She ordered the technician to filter signals, distinguishing real data from fakes. The code danced like a storm, but to her, it was just a puzzle. She'd sorted through jammed radar in combat, distinguishing friend from foe by a faint blip. This was just another version of the same deadly game. Ethan's voice returned. Remember, Maya, you chose family over honor. You're not one of us anymore. And this time, you'll fail. Maya opened her eyes, staring at the screen. She didn't speak, but her heart answered, I don't need honor. I just need to save them. She sent a final command, a concise code. Lock autopilot, ignore rogue signals, shift full control to manual. If the young pilot followed, the C-17 would fly by human hands, not as a puppet of the attacker. The command room's lights flared, the map showing a new path. The C-17 stabilized, descending controlled. Cheers erupted, clearer now, filled with hope. Collins sat stunned, his eyes on Maya no longer mocking but awestruck. But Maya didn't smile. She knew the fight wasn't over. Ethan was still out there, waiting for his next strike. And every second, the massive plane's fuel dwindled. In the command room, the wall clock ticked like a hammer on the temple. Each passing minute, the glaring second hand reminded them the C-17's fuel was running dry. The sky no sanctuary forever. Maya stood still, eyes glued to the screen, while around her, senior officers moved frantically, phones buzzing, FAA faxes pouring in, all halting when she signaled with a curt gesture. The C-17 appeared on radar as a flickering dot, its signal still laced with Ethan's false data. Maya had filtered most, but traces lingered, like ghosts in the electronics. She knew Ethan didn't just want to down a plane. He wanted this crisis to be a message. Eagle Flight wasn't dead, and Maya's guilt lived on. A large map displayed viable airfields, Norfolk, Andrews, Dover, all within reach, but only if the plane's hydraulics held. In reality, the young pilot was flying an iron beast on muscle and faith. Maya typed fast. Maintain 12,000 feet, heading 265. Prepare for Dover approach. On the screen, the C-17 turned slowly, like a giant elephant seeking home. A biometric monitor beeped, the co-pilot's breathing was erratic. Stress was crushing them. Maya swallowed memories of 9G flights that nearly blacked her out, leaving only instinct. She whispered to herself, almost a message across the void. Inhale 4, hold 7, exhale 8. Hold on. Don't let fear steer your hands. Suddenly, Ethan's voice cut through, clearer now. Taking them to Dover, Maya? Forgot how Dover buried the files? How they signed the order to erase Eagle Flight? You're walking back into the lion's den? In the room, officers looked up, uneasy. The name Eagle Flight was never to be spoken here. Now it echoed, stirring a shadow locked in red files. Collins clenched his fists, his stoic face cracking. He was a pilot but had never seen his wingmen torn apart beside him. Maya had. She didn't reply. Her only response was a new command. Descend 500 feet per minute, maintain 180 knots, prepare landing gear. Each keystroke was a bullet through the chaos. The C-17 began descending. Signals showed one landing gear jammed, hydraulics leaking. An electronic screech blared in the command room, chilling everyone. Landing on one gear, a less than 30% survival chance, but there was no choice. They'd flown too far to turn back, and fuel didn't allow another loop. Maya gripped the chair's armrest, her eyes blazing with a familiar fire. This was the moment every combat pilot knew, the point of no return. Live or vanish with the metal. Ethan's voice softened, almost a whisper. Remember that moment, Maya? When you banked right instead of holding formation? When 7 of us burned in the fire? I never burned. I'm here to remind you, honor doesn't forgive betrayal. Maya closed her eyes for a second, and in the darkness behind her lids, she saw the Mediterranean, the horizon red with fire. She heard frantic pleas, but she opened her eyes, breathing deeply. That wasn't today. Today, she had a chance to atone, not with words, but with action. Go down, she said softly, as if to the trembling pilot at the controls. Trust your hands. Radar showed the C-17 approaching Dover's runway. The descent angle was unsteady, veering left. Maya sent a final signal. Increase right thrust 3%, counter with rudder, touchdown on right main gear first. A crazy choice, but the only way to avoid snapping the plane's frame. In the room, everyone held their breath. The second hand ticked, but hearts seemed to stop. Runway cameras showed lights stretching like a silver snake, awaiting the fateful landing. The C-17 touched down. A thud shook the command room, as if the floor echoed the impact. The right main gear hit hard, smoke bursting. The plane tilted, its wing nearly scraping the ground, but Maya's balanced thrust held. The giant roared, sliding, leaving a trail of friction fire. Then, it stopped. Smoke billowed, fire trucks raced in, but it stopped. 230 lives were still alive. In the room, no one cheered yet. A heavy silence hung, as if all needed to confirm it wasn't a mirage. Then breaths broke free. Some officers covered their faces, others slammed the table. Collins slumped, his gaze quietly finding Maya. But Maya didn't celebrate. She knew Ethan wasn't done. He'd let the C-17 survive, because his real target was never just one plane. Are you still here, dear audience? Take a moment to relax, grab a glass of water, and keep listening to this gripping tale. Drop a comment with the number 1 if you find this story thrilling. Don't forget to hit subscribe. White smoke rose from Dover's runway like silent incense. Rescue teams swarmed the Iron Hulk, checking propellers, cracks. 230 lives had escaped the abyss, but the Pentagon's command room air remained thick. No one smiled, no one congratulated. They all sensed something larger, darker, looming beyond the frame. The main screen went black, then flared again. A video flickered F-35 seconds burning against the Mediterranean sky 3 years ago. Distorted audio mixed with sea wind and cut-off distress calls. Then Ethan's voice, low, as if from the ocean's depths. Want to know why only one survived Eagle Flight? Why 7 pilots burned midair while Maya Johnson flew home safe? Because she betrayed the formation. Because she chose her life over her team. The room froze. Some young officers turned, staring at Maya like a stranger. The woman stood, shoulders square, eyes unblinking. But inside, her face's muscles tensed like steel wires. Ethan continued, not letting anyone breathe. I'm the witness. I'm alive. And I'll expose the truth if the Air Force doesn't confess. I have the radar logs, radio records, black box data you thought were lost. In 48 hours, either Maya Johnson admits it, or I'll turn this secret into fire, burning your honor to ash. The screen cut off, leaving the room in silence. A general slammed the table, the sound sharp. Kill that fake signal now. I want to know where he is. But the system showed only vague coordinates, slipping between satellites like a ghost. Ethan left no trace. Maya turned away, stepping to a secondary screen. Her hand rested on the cold glass, where Eagle Flight's final path displayed. The numbers, the blips, were as familiar as the scar behind her ear. 3 years. And now they were back, demanding payment. In her mind, memories rose. That night, 8 jets plunged into an electromagnetic interference zone. The target wasn't a declared enemy, but an unidentified object, something political maps didn't allow to exist. She remembered Ethan calling to hold formation, but her radar showed danger ahead. She banked sharply, dodging a hidden missile, and the formation shattered. When she looked back, only fire remained. She hadn't betrayed. She'd chosen instinct, and that instinct made her the sole survivor. She didn't speak. Not yet. A hand touched her shoulder lightly. It was Collins, who'd mocked her from the start. Now his eyes were different, no longer arrogant, just heavy. "We were wrong," he said quietly. For her alone. But Maya didn't respond. Forgiveness didn't come from whispers, it came from the next choice. On the central table, new data appeared. Ethan wasn't just threatening, he'd acted. Another flight, a KC-10 fuel tanker, vanished from comms over North Africa. Officers' eyes turned to Maya, as if she'd become the only tool to decode the impossible. Maya took a deep breath, stepping forward, voice calm but firm. "Ethan doesn't just want to crash planes, he wants to force America to face Eagle Flight. If we chase each plane, we'll always be a step behind. The only way is to confront the truth head-on." A wave of silence spread. Confront the truth, meaning publicize classified files, breaking the wall of silence that preserved public trust and diplomacy for 3 years. But Maya's eyes didn't waver. Outside the glass, Washington's night glowed. In the secure room, another storm brewed, not of wind, but of secrets, honor, and spilled blood. Maya knew, if she didn't act, the next time wouldn't just be a C-17. The next time, Ethan would target right above the people she swore to protect. In the command room, the air shifted from panic to heavy. The C-17 landed safely, but instead of relief, the atmosphere felt caged in steel. Generals paced, phones pressed to ears, printers screeching. News called it a miracle. Here, no one dared use that word. They knew worse was coming. Maya stood apart, leaning against a cold wall. Fluorescent lights made her face gaunt, a ghost in a world she'd left behind. Ethan's words echoed, "You chose life over your team." Though she knew it was half true, though he twisted memories to sow doubt, the words stabbed an unhealed wound. A 4-star general approached, his eyes like blades. "Captain Johnson, you'll stay silent here. No interviews, no statements, no contact. You've done your part. The rest is ours." His voice wasn't gratitude, it was an order. A silencing. Maya met his gaze, unblinking. And when Ethan strikes the next one? The silence answering her was heavier than any reprimand. They had no response. They just wanted her quiet, like 3 years ago, when Eagle Flight's files were buried. She left the room, walking the Pentagon's long hallway. Framed photos lined the walls. Victories, treaties, heroes in crisp uniforms. None were captured in stained shirts, none bore the look of too much loss. She felt out of place here. But she knew the one pulling strings from the shadows belonged to this world. Ethan was once one of them. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. An unknown number, no area code. Maya stopped. inhaled deeply, and answered. The sound wasn't a voice at first, but waves, distant, steady, echoing the Mediterranean 3 years ago. Then, Ethan's voice, clear, chillingly close. Maya, you finally picked up. I've waited for this. 3 years in the dark, watching you hailed as the survivor while we vanished from history. I didn't die to be a shadow. She gripped the phone, walking faster down the empty hall. What do you want? Her voice was low, hoarse, but steady. Ethan laughed softly, not crazed but tinged with bitter sorrow. I want the truth. I want the world to know Eagle Flight wasn't a technical accident. They sent us on an impossible mission, then covered it up when it crumbled. You and I are living proof. But unlike you, I won't stay silent. Maya stopped, her finger brushing the scar behind her ear. A memory flashed. Ethan, back then, grinning confidently in the cockpit, clapping her shoulder before takeoff. We fly for those who can't. Now, those words were a knife forcing her to face him. What are you going to do? She asked. If they don't go public in 48 hours, I will. Black box, radar logs, radio records. The press will devour it. And when they do, everything you're protecting, your mother's peace, your scraps of honor will be torn apart. Her mother's name stopped Maya's breath. Ethan had intel. He'd been watching. Not just a pilot, but a link in the dark chain of intelligence. For a moment, she saw two paths. Stay silent and let Ethan destroy everything, or fight back and drag the Mediterranean secret into the light. Both had costs. Both had blood. She didn't answer. She quietly hung up, leaving the sound of waves behind. Beyond the glass, Washington's night glowed, but Maya saw only thick darkness around her. Ethan wasn't the only one she faced. The people in this building, the generals ordering her silence, were another wall. And to save the next lives, she knew she'd have to break both. Maya pressed her forehead to the glass, inhaling deeply. The next battle wasn't in a cockpit. It was here on the ground between truth and what a nation chose to bury. Washington's night lay in false calm, its lit buildings like reassuring lighthouses. But to Maya, each window was an unblinking eye, tracking her steps. She knew, after that call, nowhere was safe. Ethan was out there, and even those in the Pentagon weren't fully on her side. A secret meeting convened that night. Grim faces circled a round table. On the main screen, the KC-10's blip vanished from radar, its trail breaking mid-air. Below, cold text. 46 hours remaining. Maya was pulled to a chair, facing generals and officials. They didn't see her as the savior of 230 lives. They saw her as a dangerous variable. A silver-haired man spoke, voice calm but laced with venom. Miss Johnson, if you're in contact with him, you're a leak. If he's truly Ethan Keller, his existence is a threat. And evidence of Eagle Flight, if it exists, will shatter public trust. Maya stayed silent. In her mind, her mother's image in a hospital bed collided with the roar of jet engines. One life clung to oxygen. Hundreds hung in Ethan's hands. She couldn't choose, but she knew she had to. After the meeting, Maya was escorted to an isolated room. They called it witness protection. To her, it felt like a cell. White walls, hidden cameras, locked door. In the dark, her phone buzzed again. Not from government systems, but Ethan. The screen lit up with his face, older, gaunt, a scar running across his temple. His eyes were still those of her old wingman, but now held a dark fire. I don't want to destroy you, Maya. I want justice. 3 years. Left behind. Treated as a shadow. They called it an accident, but we both know it was an illegal mission. If they come clean, I'll vanish. If not, I'll drag everything into the light, including you. Maya stared at him through the screen, remembering shared oxygen in a cockpit, his words. We fly for those who can't. Now, he demanded that by threatening those who couldn't defend themselves. You're not the man I knew, she whispered. almost to herself. Ethan tilted his head, his laugh hoarse, blending with the sea waves in the background. Maybe. But you're still the same soul survivor, carrying the system's guilt. What'll you do, Maya? Stay silent again? Or confess? The screen went dark. Darkness swallowed the room. Maya stepped to the mirror, staring at herself. The woman reflected wasn't the brash young pilot or the frail daughter by her mother's bed. She was the survivor, scarred, the only one who could stand between two cliffs and not fall. She opened the steel cabinet, revealing a file she'd buried for 3 years. Flight logs, mission maps, lines redacted by classified orders. She touched each page, each burning her fingers like fire. One press, and it could all go public. Ethan would lose his leverage, but the U.S. military's reputation would shake. The door opened, Collins entered, face tense. He saw the file in her hands, eyes flashing shock. You're going to? Maya closed the file, her gaze sharp as a blade. I don't know what I'll do, but I know one thing: I won't let him choose for me. Collins fell silent. In that brief moment, he saw in Maya's eyes not just exhaustion, but a fire he thought had died. Outside, Washington glowed, but Maya knew the darkness was growing. Ethan had set a countdown, and she was the only one who could stop it by sacrificing her honor or letting hundreds of innocent lives be pawns. All right, dear audience, if you're gripped by this story, drop a comment with the number 1 or "I'm still here to keep listening." The night taxi rolled away from the Pentagon, leaving behind windows glowing like unblinking eyes. Maya leaned her head against the glass, hands clutching the classified file on her lap. Those pages were like an artificial heart, pulsing heavily in the dark. In her heart, 2 worlds collided. One was her mother waiting in a hospital room, clinging to hope for a surgery costing a fortune. The other was Ethan, a ghost from the Mediterranean, counting down hours to force her choice. Between them, a nation, innocent lives, and a secret that could shatter public trust. Maya closed her eyes. The taxi's engine blended with memories. F-35 seconds roaring over Syria. Explosions when friends never returned. Memories she'd tried to bury now rose, as if fate demanded payment. At the stop outside Georgetown Hospital, she opened her eyes, exhaling long. No room for hesitation. She'd survived gunfire, landed a half-broken 737. She knew the real challenge now wasn't surviving, it was daring to face the truth. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. The screen showed 46 hours. Countdown active. Maya gripped the file, stepping into the hospital's artificial light. One chapter closed, another waited to unfold.
No one thought Bravo 6 was still alive. The SEAL team had been ambushed in a deep, desolate canyon in the Sierra Nevada where not even drones could reach. The command center fell silent. Maps were crossed out in red. The final transmission: "No way out. If you hear this, tell our families we fought." Everyone was frozen except for one person. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't need orders. When her A-10 roared to life, the entire base seemed to hold its breath. Because everyone knew, if she took off, something was about to change. This was not just a mission. This was a moment when a woman flew alone into a place even war itself had refused to enter. And if you're watching this story, perhaps it's because you, too, have once stood before a storm no one else dared to face. This is the story of a woman, an aircraft, and the moment she changed an entire battlefield with nothing but will and steel. The radio transmission lasted exactly 8 seconds, yet it brought all of Nellis Base to a standstill, as if something deep beneath the earth had just cracked. Bravo 6, command, pinned against the rocks. Enemy holds the high ground. Ammunition nearly depleted. Don't try to withdraw. This is our last time. Static swallowed the final words, leaving behind a long, suffocating silence in the tactical coordination room. Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Blitz Ramirez stood near the back of the room. She didn't move. She didn't blink. The old, dust-darkened flight suit had been taken down from its hook an hour earlier, yet she still hadn't put it on. Her arms were folded, her gaze locked on the green glow of the radar screen, a faint halo of light amid the dense darkness of the warning system. The screen offered no signal, no sound, no life, only tight lines of terrain contours, like cords cinched around the throats of everyone in the room. All felt that something was ending, but no one dared say it aloud. Captain Harmon, the liaison officer with Bravo, leaned forward as if trying to touch the final signal before it faded away. He had once served alongside that SEAL team. He knew they weren't ones to surrender easily. And so, that brief farewell carried a crushing weight like an iron door closing without fanfare. Around him, senior officers lowered their heads. A few maps were pulled out, hastily marking alternate extraction routes, but no one believed in them. Drones couldn't get in. The F-16 second couldn't fly low enough. The Sierra Nevada terrain to the east, where locals called it the Devil's Throat, was a labyrinth of rock and swirling wind, notorious for having downed 3 helicopters in just 1 week of training back in 2006. Lieutenant Colonel Garrett Harrow, the operations commanding officer, spoke in a low voice. "We wait until nightfall. If they're still breathing, we'll send the Black Hawks in under moonlight." No one replied. Because waiting until nightfall meant waiting until it was too late. The topographic map glowed on the main screen. Sheer mountain walls, cutting winds, heat haze from the desert below blinding the radar. The enemy base held full control of the eastern ridge. RPG range covered every point of entry. From above, it looked like a deadly bowl with Bravo 6 trapped in the middle. Everyone knew that. Under such conditions, even retreat was a luxury. No one said it aloud, but the glances exchanged across the room all whispered the same truth. Bravo 6 was already saying their own farewell. The bravest men of the U.S. Navy were giving a final goodbye no one could answer. And then Blitz stepped forward. She didn't speak. She didn't file a report. She didn't make demands. She simply gave a slight nod, walked toward the control panel, and pulled the flight suit up over her shoulders. An aging technician instinctively stepped back, unable to utter a word, because those who had seen Blitz take off before understood. If she went airborne, something was about to change. Not a miracle, but a kind of fight no doctrine had ever taught. No one asked what she intended to do. No one dared, because they had seen that look, the look that needed no permission, no praise. The look of someone who had decided to fly into a place even machines hesitated to go. Did everyone know exactly what would happen next? Number. But they all knew one thing. If Blitz took to the sky, the heavens themselves were about to bear witness.
Welcome to Veteran Best Stories, where the war ends, but the stories live on. From the foxholes to front porches, we honor the silent battles our veterans still fight. Subscribe and walk with us beyond the battlefield.
Blitz wasn't the kind of person you would remember from the first meeting. She didn't speak at length, didn't shake hands too firmly, and always left the room before anyone had the chance to ask what she was thinking. Some said she was reserved. Others put it bluntly, she's quiet to the point of being unsettling. But over time, something about her began to make even the oldest officers wary, not because she was loud, but because she always showed up exactly where she was needed, before anyone even called her name. During training at Davis-Monthan, she almost always ranked third in most evaluations, never at the top, never drawing attention. And yet, oddly enough, whenever there was a dangerous flight drill crossing landslide terrain, simulating wind shear, flying close to the ground, she was the one chosen. Not through deliberate assignment, but because the coordinator instinctively reached for her name. Sometimes, trust doesn't come from what a person says, it comes from the way they grip the stick, as if they've already lost someone before by letting go. The first time she touched the A-10 Thunderbolt II, her instructor, a silver-haired colonel who had once commanded in Fallujah, simply sighed and scribbled in his notebook. Unusual reaction, no tension, no resistance, just integration. That sentence was never mentioned again, but the technicians passed the word among themselves. She flies as if the plane is guiding her, not the other way around. She didn't fight the warthog, she understood it. Once, during a wind shear simulation, when most pilots plunged into the course according to instructions, Blitz instead veered slightly off timing, tilted the right wing, then dipped down as if she had read the terrain before the radar did. Later, she explained, "That crosswind once took down 2 recon birds. I just didn't want to repeat it. No arrogance, no theatrics, just someone remembering what others had forgotten." But not everyone knew where that came from. Her file contained nothing remarkable. She had grown up in a small border town in Arizona, the only daughter of an immigrant welder and a nurse. Her father once told her, "If you can't see the path clearly, bow your head and listen to the wind. The wind doesn't lie." And perhaps that was what she carried with her when the class learned procedures. She learned silence. When others waited for orders, she waited for the wind. In her 3rd year of service, while supporting an urgent training operation at the Grand Canyon, an incident occurred. 2 training jets had gone off course after a burst of signal interference. They couldn't climb due to low cloud cover, and couldn't escape because sheer cliffs walled them in on both sides. The radar was useless, and the base was already preparing for total loss. Until an A-10, one that hadn't even been assigned to the mission, dove straight into the canyon. Blitz had entered the area on her own, with no orders. She flew so close to the rock face that shrubs scraped against the fuselage. A slight tilt, then a reverse direction barrel roll. An aerial maneuver theory dictated should only be used in dogfights, never in enclosed terrain. And yet, somehow, she guided both stranded aircraft out of the gorge. No shots fired, no signals sent. Just her and the wind, threading their way through a pass between life and death. No one filmed it, no reporters came, but every maintenance technician knew, and a few days later, one of them, a Navajo corporal, quietly slipped an embroidered patch into her personal mailbox. Against a gray canvas background was stitched the image of a red cyclone sweeping across 3 bright dots. At the bottom, a small line of text. "Kunor Pass, we do not forget." Blitz never wore it, but she kept it in the upper left pocket of her flight jacket, where only a family crest or special mission badge would normally go. She didn't brag, didn't tell the story, didn't react when others asked. But those who knew, knew. That cyclone wasn't just a symbol. It was something Blitz carried, an unshared memory, a reason that didn't need to be put into words. And today, as she zipped up her flight suit outside the tactical room, they saw her hand briefly touch that exact spot. No one noticed except a young technician. He had never been told about Kunor Pass, yet still asked, "What's that, Lieutenant Colonel?" Blitz didn't answer. She only smiled. The small, measured smile as if to say, "It's been long enough." And would you believe it, sometimes a small piece of fabric can hold an entire battle the world has never heard of? So, what do you think will happen when the one who carries that patch takes to the sky again? Comment number 1, or "I'm still here," to keep listening. No one would remember exactly who first uttered the word impossible in the command room that day. It could have been a combat officer. It could have been an air defense technician. But what was certain was this: just 8 seconds after Bravo 6's final transmission, the room had descended into a state of disciplined panic. Every gaze was locked on the 3D terrain display. The sunken area at the center of the map flashed red Devil's Throat, a canyon of bizarre formation in the Sierra Nevada range, walled in by sheer slopes and an unpredictable network of thermal currents. Radar couldn't reach the bottom. Low-flying drones were sucked into wind eddies and dropped like flies. F-16 second? Too fast. Too fragile. Helicopters? Pure suicide. A senior officer removed his headset. We've lost them. Silence followed. Not because everyone agreed, but because no one dared to disagree. No one wanted to be the next person pulled into that rocky gorge where even the air seemed angry. Blitz stood there unaddressed, unspeaking. She was part of the shadow, silent, but not invisible. In her hand, the flight suit was pulled halfway up her body. Her other hand still rested on the gray patch along her left arm. She lowered her head slightly, brushing her fingertips over the image of a cyclone swirling around a chain of red lights. It wasn't ritual. It wasn't a good luck charm. It was simply an old gesture, like someone touching an old scar to remind themselves, I have come back from the impossible before. No one told her to go. No one gave her orders. But when her footsteps rang against the steel floor, that sound seemed to split the tense air in the room. A young technician murmured to the person beside him, No way she's actually going to do it. Another older only shook his head. Number, she's not going to do anything. Blitz doesn't plan. She does. The flight was not in the mission plan. No registered call sign, no support tactics. Every piece of equipment said no. And yet Blitz's A-10C Warthog had already been pulled out of the hangar, lined up and waiting. No one knew who powered it on first. Maybe her. Maybe the ground crew, because some orders don't need to be spoken. The twin TF-34 engines began to growl like a beast awakened. The distinctive sound of the A-10 not deafening, but enough to make everyone in the maintenance bay stop in their tracks. Like a distant horn announcing that something had begun and would not be stopped. Blitz walked toward the cockpit. Not fast, not slow. She climbed the ladder as if she'd done it thousands of times, which she had, but this time, something was different. She didn't look at anyone. But everyone looked at her. The crew hurried to load ammunition into the GA-8 Avenger. Armor-piercing rounds were checked, flares replenished, hydraulics tested one last time. There was a shared sense that this flight was unlike any other. One of the ground crew quietly approached her as she fastened her harness. He handed her a small cloth pouch. Inside was a second patch embroidered with a lightning bolt slashing between two mountain peaks. This is from the Grand Canyon team, he said. They send their thanks. Blitz gave a faint smile, the rare kind that made you remember she wasn't a machine. She slipped the patch into her left chest pocket, then sealed the cockpit latch. Sunlight struck the reflective canopy glass, erasing her face entirely, leaving only the silhouette of a pilot in a storm building. The control tower was unusually quiet. No urging, no second guessing. They only heard one line, clear over the internal frequency. Stormfront 01, request, departure clearance heading 27, no support. 1 second, 2. Then the coordinator's voice came back, small but steady. Stormfront 01, cleared for takeoff. Godspeed. The Warthog's wings whined as it pivoted on the runway. She pushed the throttle, sending the aircraft surging into the sky, flying lower than radar range and closer to the hearts of those waiting for life than anyone dared imagine. No one was sure what would happen next, but everyone understood. The sky had just lost its claim to dominion. Do you think she could change the tide alone? Then wait until you see Blitz turn the A-10 into a storm between rock and fire. Blitz's A-10 plunged into the heart of the Sierra Nevada with no call, no consent, only a reason that needed no words. As she crossed the radar boundary, the base lost her signal. But inside the Devil's Throat Canyon, where rock rose like blades and the wind sliced like a knife, she was still alive, and she was fighting. No one could see it. No drones, no satellites. Only those on the ground knew what was happening, the men counting down the final seconds of their lives. Blitz flew so low that dust from her engine sprayed against the rock face in bursts, leaving white streaks along the stone. Altitude, under 30 meters. In those conditions, a single wrong move would turn the aircraft into a ball of fire. But she didn't make a wrong move. Bravo's squad, the SEAL team under siege, was falling back toward the last choke point in the valley. Above them, enemy forces had set up RPG and machine gun lines, ready to cut them down like a noose tightening. But Blitz got there first. She caught the first heat signature through her sight. Without a second's hesitation, the 30mm Avenger roared to life. The blasts hit like hammers striking the mountain's chest. The shells punched through sandbags, sending dirt and rock flying, smashing every ambush point. Dust clouds rose like the smoke of a giant forge. The SEALs looked up. Through the haze, they saw a gray silhouette flash past, vanishing behind the cliffs, bringing with it a hope they thought was dead. She didn't stop. To the south, 2 enemy armored vehicles were barreling down the slope to cut off the escape route. Blitz banked, dropped altitude, and when she was in range 1, clean shot blew the first apart. The second lost control, tipped over, and exploded moments later. Every turn, every squeeze of the trigger wasn't just a maneuver, it was a choice between life and death, and she chose life for others. From the west, a Chinook approached, carrying the rest of Bravo. Heavy, bulky, slow a target, as easy as ducks on a pond. And then, exactly as she predicted, a flash erupted from the mountainside. An RPG streaked toward the Chinook. No time. No tactical countermeasure could make it in time. She dove. The A-10 was not built to intercept missiles, but Blitz didn't care. She rolled the wings, forcing her jet wash to cut across the missile's path. The projectile veered off course for a fraction of a second, long enough to detonate harmlessly behind her tail. No one could believe it. An old officer whispered over the headset, "Did she just block a missile with her plane?" Yes, and it wouldn't be the last time. Blitz kept circling, clearing the way for the SEALs' retreat. But the aircraft was starting to fail. Hydraulic systems flashed warnings. The auxiliary engine stuttered. The display trembled ever so slightly, a bad sign. Then, another enemy group appeared on the western ridge, moving to cut off the landing zone. Blitz swung around quietly, not firing. She skimmed low, just low enough to unleash a shockwave. The enemy dropped flat, their weapons falling from their hands. She didn't kill, because saving lives doesn't always mean destroying others. The Chinook touched down, survivors clinging to one another, uniforms streaked with blood scrambled aboard. One of them, just before stepping inside, turned back to the sky. There was nothing but a fading gray speck, like a wisp of dust in the twilight. Blitz had done it. Her aircraft shuddered violently. Pressure was gone. Warning lights flashed red like ruptured veins. But she kept flying by instinct, by feel, by something that can't be taught, willpower. A ground technician murmured slowly. She didn't survive because the plane was good. The plane survived because she was still in it. She flew over the ridge, leaving the Devil's Throat behind, and at that exact moment, a single blip appeared on the command radar, the first signal, after nearly 15 minutes of absolute silence. Stormfront 01. Alive. The base erupted. Some slammed their hands on the table. Some dropped their heads into their chairs. No one spoke, but everyone knew. A miracle had just happened, not by luck, but because someone had chosen to stand in the center of the storm. My dear viewers, stay tuned for the next part, the one that will leave you in awe. Take a second to leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all over the world. The moment Blitz's A-10 gave its final roar and rolled to a stop on the emergency runway, the air in the base seemed to solidify. There were no cheers, only a long stretch of silence, as if the entire sky itself was holding its breath. When the cockpit hatch opened, Blitz stepped out. Her eyes were tired, but burned with determination. Sweat and smoke still clung to the straps of her helmet, yet before her, the technicians couldn't hide their awe. One of them, the oldest in the maintenance crew, took a step back, his voice trembling. "You weren't supposed to fly, but you did." It wasn't a blunt compliment. It was a quiet confession, offered to a heart unbalanced, yet beating fiercely. Footage from the Chinook's onboard camera hit the internal network like lightning. It showed the A-10 skimming the canyon's edge like a ghost silk shadow between rock and smoke, enough to make anyone watching feel their hair stand on end. A SEAL, lucky to be alive, stared at the screen and whispered to his teammate, "An angel, flying under the radar. No insignia needed, no name spoken, just a single line enough to tighten throats and press lips shut." Military forums lit up like summer Sunday. If the definition of impossible means anything, Blitz just rewrote it. The story of her low-flight victory, almost entirely by instinct, spread from Nellis Base to Continental Air Wings, took root in the tactical rooms of Guam, and even reached senior leadership at the Pentagon. Blitz was summoned for an internal investigation. She was formally assessed as having exceeded orders, putting national assets at risk. But, as one sharp lawyer noted, not every order saves lives. The radio recordings, flight data, radar images, all sat in silent testimony for her. The story needed no language to be clear. The U.S. Air Force began revising its low-flight tactical procedures, not calling it the Blitz method, but any young pilot learning to thread through narrow passes would eventually hear about her first, like a modern legend. Some stories say that at Nellis, when new pilots ask, "Who's the one who flies like a storm?" the answer is, "Her. But don't try it until you've clocked 200 hours. In young pilot training schools, the phrase "fly by feel" suddenly took on weight. It was no longer a vague concept on a PowerPoint slide. It became a real skill, passed from Blitz's small Arizona hometown to the cloud lines over North Dakota. The public knew nothing of the internal story, but a short TikTok clip, barely 30 seconds, showed Blitz climbing aboard a helicopter, her gray flight suit scorched, her eyes weary but unbroken, posted quietly online by the PR team. It went viral in hours, layered with soft, low music titled "The Woman Who Changed the Sky." Young women, especially in the Southwest, began speaking of Blitz with admiration. One wrote, "I used to think being a pilot was for men. Then I saw Blitz flying through stone mountains and realized feel matters most." An online artist even painted her dust, covered a 10 as an ancient bird, the name Stormfront etched beneath its talons. No one had asked her to be a role model, but to that community she already was. No politics, no rallying cry, just a lone figure who chose to stand in the storm and pull others back from the brink. A week later, in an unplanned internal ceremony, Blitz was given a special edition of the Cyclone patch, this time encircled by a compass ring. The presenter spoke for her in a single line. "We don't just need to fly, we need someone who knows the way." No one laughed. No one mentioned orders. Everything was understood. She didn't speak. She accepted the patch with cold eyes and a faint curl of her lips, just like her gaze between the shards of rock the day before. No crowds, no television cameras, yet enough to spread inspiration. Because sometimes, one look, one act, is enough to let a nation exhale and know that no one dares to fly like that except you. She had become the storm. But the story wasn't over. Behind the glow there were questions, and she would have to answer them. Will you stay to hear? From the moment the internal ceremony began, the air was unusually still. Not the silence of protocol, but the kind born of hearts waiting for a sign to delve deeper into the person being honored. When Lieutenant Colonel Rachel Blitz Ramirez was called, the stage lights were neither glaring nor concealing. They simply cast a gentle glow, enough to highlight the restrained yet weighty presence of the figure stepping forward. The old technician, the one who had once embroidered the Cyclone red lights patch in the aircraft's bay, now stood on the dais. In his hands was a new insignia silver, finely pressed into the shape of a 10 wings with a red spiral running through the middle, recalling the special storm that had pulled Bravo team out of the devil's throat. He extended it toward her with the utmost reverence, as if returning something she had left there, a symbol of survival written not in words, but in action. Blitz looked down at the grain of metal in her hand. The soft light glinted off it, reflecting like a memory. Once again, she said nothing. Not because she felt nothing, but because she knew silence creates the space for other hearts to echo. She fastened the insignia to her flight suit's shoulder, a perfect fit, just as she had always flown narrow and deep through the canyons of the Sierra Nevada. No one needed to say that this was the mark of an action, but all understood the symbol was no longer a sign of danger. It was a declaration: when the sky refuses, you must turn the aircraft into a storm. An officer at the corner of the stage switched on his phone, capturing the moment. Blitz's stern eyes, her lips pressed tight, her hand gripping the new insignia just pinned on. She did not speak, but her gaze said, "We do not exist merely to be free. We exist to fly where no one else dares." A tear did not fall, but in the ranks of her comrades a hand rested lightly on her shoulder. No words needed. An act of comfort and also a promise. The story would not end here. Blitz left the stage with the same quiet steps as when she flew through the canyon pass. There were no shouts of "Hurrah!" No grand expressions of thanks. Only the sound of her footsteps, echoing through the heart of the night. And the best part there was no public press release. No live broadcast. Only an internal video shown across the base, replaying the moment she pushed her flaps while flying through the pass, then later reached up to touch the red cyclone patch. A short clip, wordless but enough for anyone watching to understand. Sometimes, action needs no words to become immortal. The story of Blitz was no longer about a lone pilot. It had become a symbol, something others wanted to retell. She did not become a legend because she was ordered to. She became one because she chose to stand on the line that theory called impossible. When she climbed onto the logistics transport to return to the runway, every gaze turned to her again. Not because of fame, but because of the presence of someone who had reignited faith through action. No medal, no slogan. And if you think the story ended with the insignia ceremony, think again. Behind that light was a new beginning, a journey that no aircraft and no written account could ever fully contain. Have you ever seen a symbol powerful enough to change the way you see the world? Blitz has done that. And now what will happen when that symbol steps into where you live? Think about that before you switch off the screen. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. Perhaps you, like me, sometimes wonder, do those who quietly fight for others ever get recognized? But the most beautiful truth is, they don't need that. They don't need to be seen to shine. They only need a reason to keep moving forward. And for Lieutenant Colonel Ramirez, that reason was life, her teammates, and the silence that deserves to be heard. If there's one thing to take away, it's this. Sometimes, you don't need wings to be an angel. You just need the courage to fly into the storm when everyone else stops. If this story has touched you, leave a comment below. Tell me if you've ever met a blitz in real life. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need the reminder that sometimes we ourselves are the storm that brings hope. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because here we tell the stories of those whose names aren't spoken but should never be forgotten.